Okay, let me do one more mic check. Okay, one more time. Okay. Mr. Lee, can you hear me, or can any LSC members confirm that they can hear me? Okay, great. Thank you so much. I think we finally sorted out the technical difficulties. Bill, just so that you know, we are lacking a quorum in person. There are only 5 people in person. When we do the roll call, we'll do, sorry, 6 people in person, so we won't be able to vote on anything. Aisha told me that she was coming, so when she shows up, we will have enough to vote. Okay. All right, with that, I will start the meeting. Good evening, everyone. Letty, can you make your translation announcement? I'm going to assume that Letty's giving her explanation on the interpretation channel. So I'll just give her a second to finish. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and proceed. Good evening, everyone. Please take a moment to update your name in Zoom and your role in the community. Welcome to the Peirce LSC meeting. The members of the Peirce of the LSC are elected representatives of our school. The LSC is responsible for setting the school's direction and policies and for monitoring its financial and educational programs. All participants are muted, and we will invite you to unmute during public participation. We have 2 opportunities for public participation. Each opportunity will be 10 minutes. Every participant may comment for up to 2 minutes per opportunity. The chat will also be enabled during public participation. We ask that you save your questions for the public participation portion of the meeting, at which time we will ask you to stack in the chat so that we can invite you to speak in the order indicated. This meeting is also being live streamed via YouTube. For those wishing to pre-register watching via YouTube, you may email your comments to peircelsc@gmail.com. At the conclusion of this meeting, Principal Zamy will receive the video recording of the meeting, which will be posted to the LSC Google Drive. I am now calling the meeting to order. LSC members, please announce your name for roll call purposes.
Lori Zamy, principal.
Tremaine Avery, parent rep. Evan Track, teacher rep.
Jerry Baumgartner, teacher rep.
Matthew Kwame, parent rep.
Javier Seawright, parent rep.
Sandra Kafarkis, non-teaching rep.
Bill Kennedy, parent rep.
Byron Adams, community rep.
Claire Gervasi, parent rep.
Okay, is there a motion to approve the order of the agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the order of the agenda.
Thank you, Bill. Is there a second?
I second. Trey and I do that every time.
It's very cute. Okay, motion having been second. All those in favor of approving the order of the agenda? All those opposed? Abstaining, not voting? Motion passes. Agenda is approved. The first item of on the agenda is just an announcement. This is just to inform the community that there was an OMA complaint filed against the Peirce Local School Council, and that investigation has concluded, and a copy of the determination is available on the LSC Google Drive for this meeting. Would anyone like to make any, is there any discussion on this point? Seeing none, moving on to the next item on the agenda, the Student Council report. We have Manny from the Student Council to update the Peirce LSC. Can we move the microphone closer to Manny? Thank you.
How hear him? No, no.
Can you hear Manny?
No. Could hear you really, really well. I cannot hear Manny.
Hear me now? Bill, can you hear me?
Yeah, Manny, can you come sit over here? Sorry. I'll just move away.
Just look at your computer. There you go. You can see you there.
Yep.
So my name is Manny and I'm one of the student council representatives, and I'm just here to tell you about what is happening in our school and what student council has been doing for the school. So the first thing is our student council has voted to have a president, a vice president, a treasurer, and a secretary. And then the next thing that's happening is we had a focus group with Miss Amy to tell her about like all the stuff we want to have changed in the school. For like some examples, we have discussed like what we need in our bathrooms, what we would like in our lunch, or like what we could change in our like playgrounds, or what equipment we would like in our playgrounds. And yeah, we also asked our homerooms to see, so we get all of our like stuff to tell to Miss Amy from our classrooms. So just telling you guys it's not all us that want this. And then also we had a door decorating contest for the last week and for Valentine's Day, and all grades through pre-K and 8th grade have participated in our door decorating contests with the theme of love, kindness, gratitude, or something that is connected with those 3 themes. And so today we voted on our doors, and each grade gets a winner. Also on a relation with Valentine's Day, we have kindness citations, which are basically little hearts that students can write to another student about something they did or what they like about them. And you put them in a box that student council has decorated and put outside of homerooms. And if the student is in that homeroom, you put the note in there, and then in the hallways, there's big hearts. And at the end of each day, we put the hearts on the big heart. So right now, the big hearts are covered with kindness citations. And this will continue until the end of February.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You did
Thank
great.
you, Manny.
Huh?
You tell me grade you're in again?
5th grade.
You're in 5th grade.
You did great. Jack?
Go back down and-
You can stay there for a
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah,
Does anyone have questions for Manny?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Trey?
Hi, I just have one more question that I probably could hear you a little bit. But can you tell me, can you repeat some of the concerns or?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, the chair just moved for people. Hi, sir. Can you tell us some of the concerns that were raised for the focus group? I thought I heard something bad lunch or something like that, or lunch.
Oh, so in the focus group, I wasn't there because my class was in quarantine, but from what I heard is that the kids didn't really like the lunch and they wanted it changed. And also other students wanted vegetarian options because, some kids were vegetarian. And at this meeting, we had another student say they want gluten-free options. Yeah, so there's a lot going on with lunch right now.
Thank you so much.
Well done.
Can you speak to some of the issues around bathrooms?
Okay, so in the bathrooms in the old building, I think the paint in the bathrooms and on the stalls are peeling. And also the bathrooms have been or the students say that the bathrooms are really like unsanitary. There's like always stuff on the ground. And also there's also not enough feminine products. So they also asked to like restock because there's never enough feminine products in the bathrooms. And so yeah, they just wanted to repaint the bathrooms for them to restock and to be a little bit more hygienic in the bathrooms.
Thank you.
Manny, did the teacher share with you my response after our focus group?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, did students have any feedback to that?
No, not really. We really didn't say anything about it, but we were just like, oh, that's cool.
Okay. Just so that others know, the student council focus group is one of like the most important things for me is to get students' voice and perspective. And so I always appreciate hearing from student council, and I appreciate you being here tonight because you would be doing other things in the snow, but you're here, so I appreciate that. But I think when I hear from students that there's things that they want to work on, I do work to follow up and communicate back to student council so that they know where we're at. And so as Manny had mentioned, there was a concern about the number of vegetarian options and gluten-free options. And so I talked to Jasenia in the lunchroom and shared with her that feedback. And she said she was going to work on increasing the number of vegetarian options. And so what I asked student council is to let me know if there's still finding issue and if there's still things that we need to fine tune. We can't change the vendor and there's a lot we can't control, but something like that we can. And so we want to make sure that we're doing that. The bathrooms are a big issue, and I had shared with them that that's actually been something I've been talking to the district about. When I first got here, there was a lot of graffiti in the bathrooms, and so maybe 3 years ago, 2-3 years ago, a parent had worked on painting the bathroom stalls, but what happened is that all that paint started to peel. And so I've requested the district to just completely replace all of the old building bathroom stalls. And so we're waiting to see whether or not they're gonna approve that, but they don't look good, but that's what I'm pushing for, is for the district to just completely replace them. And then things like they had asked for mirrors, like updated mirrors in the bathrooms. And so I had asked Sally to purchase new mirrors so that because that's an easy fix. Feminine hygiene projects are supposed to be available in the bathroom. And so that's been something that we've been working with the custodial team and the engineer on to make sure that we have that available and that the custodians know to regularly stock it. And so it's helpful to know when that is or is not happening, but that has been requested. And then the slide continues to come up. And so I was told that by March 31st, it's supposed to be installed. So I really hope that that is true. But that's what I was actually told this morning. And then I asked student council to give me a list of equipment that they would really like to have outside that they don't have, because they had mentioned that they want additional equipment, but I don't know what that is. And so I've asked them to create a list and bring that back to me. And I appreciate that you all have done the Spirit Week, like the door decorating contest, because the thing that students said is that they want more opportunity to celebrate in school. And so student council is sort of taking that on as ways to continue to increase celebration.
Like for celebration, me and my other student council representative, we were talking about like more, because you know we were celebrating it's Black History Month, but we also kind of want like Latinx History Month and like Asian History Month and like Native Islander like History Month. And so we were just talking about how like it's kind of unfair to only have Black History Month and not all of these other history months for other races.
Okay, that's good feedback to hear. Okay, that's something I want to think more about to make sure that students are seeing sort of the progression of ways that we're recognizing intentionally some of our cultural heritage months. Thank you for that.
So just wanted to say that. And also for the lunches today, we did have a vegetarian option. Today we had veggie burgers. And so I just wanted to comment on the lunches.
Keep me posted if that doesn't happen. I appreciate that feedback. Thank you, Manny.
Awesome, good job.
Thank you, Manny.
Yeah.
Try to do the other one up that way.
No, I think it's just my coat that. And before we move on from this topic, I know that one of the things that the student council also spoke about was making bathrooms more welcoming for non-binary students. And so I'm really proud of that conversation that you are having. And also the feminine hygiene products, that's something that I don't think that we would have had when I was growing up. So I think it's important to me, and it's important to a lot of people that those discussions are being had. So thank you, Manny, and thank you to the Student Council. Bill, I'm just going to let you know that Aisha has arrived. It's 6:26 by my clock, so we have a quorum in person. The next item on the agenda is, this is ironic, items needing council approval. On the agenda is the approval of the minutes for the regular meeting of January 20th. The problem is that we actually have not received the minutes for January 20th. We did receive the minutes for the special meeting on the 18th, but I didn't include those on the agenda, so we actually can't vote on them anyway. So my apologies for not coordinating better on that point. Next item on the agenda is the principal's report. Have we confirmed that they can hear you out of that mic?
Can you hear me? Testing?
Okay, yes. Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. The first thing that I'll give an update on is our continuous improvement work plan. CPS has informed schools that they can continue the current 2-year CIWP for 3 years, shifting us into next school year because many schools were unable to address their priority areas. Schools do have the option of revising priority areas if the current priority areas do not align to what the school really needs to work on. Our school priority areas related to formative assessment and differentiation are very much in alignment with the work that we need to continue doing, considering that we didn't have the opportunity to really dig into that last year and very minimally this year. And so in talking with Javier, I think one of the things that we did want to think about is how do we want to go about sort of a check-in around the current CIWP, given that a lot of it won't necessarily change. But like, who do we like bring to the table to form our CIWP team? In the past, Bill Kennedy is actually part of like the current CIWP team from the local school council, and we'd engaged in the past with Parent Advisory Council, Bilingual Advisory Council, Racial Equity Parent Group has made recommendations to the council as well, which helped inform the current plan. But so we're not looking at a complete rehaul of the CIWP, but an opportunity to reassemble a team to look at where are we at and what might we want to change. The most difficult part of our current plan is not really having a data point that's been consistent with the work that we're doing. So we initially wrote the CIWP with MAP as the measure that we would measure student progress along with access. But as MAP is now gone and now we have STAR 360, we don't have a baseline for what STAR 360 data looks like. And we had revised goals last year, which the LSC approved, related to On Track. The issue with On Track right now is that because of so many classes being flipped to remote learning, because attendance is such a huge part of the On Track percentage, our On Track numbers are not very accurate either, because of so many flips and so many forced days of absence for our students. So establishing what the goal is that we're going to measure is something that has been a little bit difficult in thinking through what should that metric be. So I'm just trying to like put that out there as I thought last year that On Track would make a lot of sense, and then this year it's not seeming like that makes a lot of sense. So I'm not sure what the council wants to do in terms of, like in assembling of a CIWP team, coordinating with school and LSC. If we want to like say that there's 1 or 2 LSC members that we can meet with some of the teachers, if it's still Bill who had met with us in the past, and just continue to engage that way. We have the opportunity to just like have like separate sessions, and then me working with a core group of people to like revise things that may or may not need revision. So it doesn't have to be even like the whole team together at one time. It can be like fractions of the team. So like, what are things that we're hearing from parents? What are things that we're hearing from staff? Like, what do we want to consider? So I'm just putting that out there. Javier, I'm not sure at what point you want to like discuss that or think through, like we could do that today. We could do it in the next meeting, there's like an intentional talking point, but I just wanted to draw attention to that. The other thing, sort of shifting gears, that I wanted to mention is that the district released two tentative options for the school year 23 calendar, and they've emailed that out, and I've emailed it out to the school community. The district is seeking input on that. Some of the highlights from those calendar changes are that students would start before Labor Day. Again, it would either be the week before Labor Day or 2 weeks before Labor Day. And some of the conversation around the earlier start time is that the district is seeing this, especially at the high school level, an opportunity to have more instructional days for students prior to AP exams, IB exams, and the SAT tests. And so at the I never even realized that was a concern at the high school level. My issue has always been the no school November. But it was interesting to hear that other perspective. And I know people feel very differently even within that context. The other thing is that there would be no instructional days that week of Thanksgiving. Report card day would be that Monday. And then Tuesday through Friday would be days off for staff members, but for students, they wouldn't have school that entire week. And that's helped address some of the issues with no school November. Because we've had so many interrupted weeks, this at least decreases the number of interrupted weeks. And the district has also shifted to combining report card day on one day versus having 1 day for high schools and 1 day for elementary schools. They've also increased the number of professional development days that would be built within the calendar, because that's been something that schools have always struggled with, is not having enough whole school PD time with their staff. So that feedback has been asked to be submitted by tomorrow. So if we haven't had a chance to give input and you'd like to, please complete the survey. I've linked it in this presentation, which is found in the Google Drive, and then I'd also emailed it out along with the district. Developing capacity is has done, is close to finishing their work with the school, but we've decided to put a little bit of a pause on some of the work with the teachers, and I'll explain that in a moment. Dr. Fisher has worked with the staff on 4 equity leadership workshops, and staff have completed a half of the conscious teaching for equity workshops. And so the conscious teaching for equity workshops is where we want to look at building into next school year. The admin and school leadership team completed 3 out of the 3 sessions, along with 1 additional meeting. And then there were the 2 racial healing and reconciliation sessions that were led with the local school council, and the community was invited to those public meetings. The living equity from purpose to practice will be done as the equity committee, which is a subcommittee of the LSC, is formed. Dr. Fisher will meet with that committee to help set them up to continue, positioning themselves to lead for equity within the school. The reason that we put a pause on that final session with Dr. Fisher is that what she found is, as she's trying to do virtual meetings with our staff are going in between, dropping students off to specials, coming into a virtual meeting, and then asked to go back to teaching. And what she was feeling is that staff needed time without students and time to process, so that they could really reflect and really be present. And that's very hard to do when you've got so much going on. And she really would like to do it on a whole school professional development day in person. And so we talked, and we want to push that final session into the fall. We're hoping like that startup week for PD, and I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think that was very thoughtful on her part, that this wasn't about just completing the work, but trying to make sure that staff were present and able to receive the information and be able to apply it. So I appreciated her noticing that among our staff, and she took a pause and she changed gears with the team because she was scheduled to meet with them, and so she just did a check-in with them. So we're pushing that into the fall to finish that last one. We will be close to sharing our action plan that we created within our the leadership team. We were able to finalize a lot this afternoon, actually, and so we're in the final phases of, we'll be cleaning that up a little bit and then sharing that back to the school community. Dr. Heiser had met with myself, Sam, Kristen, Shannon, and Shelton to review the staff survey data. We had also reviewed that survey data within our leadership team, and we looked at that survey data in the PPLC last week. The week of February 28th, I'll be meeting with all grade level teams to review that data and ask teachers to also think about where we're at and what do we want to focus on, so that we can create a second sort of action plan as a result of the survey feedback. Once I've had a chance to meet with teachers, we'll then be able to share back to the school community sort of what we found from the survey and what we're doing as a result of the survey. And that was a survey that was just administered to staff members. We held a cross-partnership meeting with Dr. Fisher from Developing Capacity, with Facing History, the Gus Foundation, Josiah from Northwestern, and then parents from the Racial Equity Parent Group. And this was an opportunity for partners to hear about the work that was happening in other spaces as it relates to equity. That was the initial goal. We then surveyed those that participated to hear from everyone, what would they like to see as a result of that. And so we haven't figured out what we're going to do next, but we're thinking either a quarterly or a semester meeting to bring our partners together to share is helpful from strategizing, but also from realizing that some of the work is living in other ways that partners may not realize. Reach observations have started. We had to complete first observations for non-tenured teachers by February 18th. As a result of all of the shifts with learning this year, tenured teachers do not need to be evaluated. And so we're prioritizing our non-tenured staff members. And we've divided up those observations, and they each require 3 observations between now and the middle of May. And so we've completed the first round of evaluations, and then we're working on the second round. And it's been really helpful to be very intentional about, observing instruction and providing feedback to teachers. Did you want to give an update on attendance?
Sure. So at this point, in the February column, our all student attendance has fallen just a slight bit to 92.9. Our Native American population is at 91.4, our Asian population at 91.2, our Black population at 89%, Hispanic at 92.3, multiracial 91, and white 94.4. As Ms. Amy had mentioned earlier in her principal's report, we have been impacted still with flip to remote. However, we are seeing our numbers start to stabilize as more students are vaccinated and not whole classrooms are not being flipped. Along with that, our students with IEPs fell slightly from last year, end of the year, to 89.9, and our students identified as English language learners are at a 92.3%. We're hoping that these numbers do increase as the spring months come along, and we're able to keep more kids in class.
Lisa, did you have a question?
Sure. So we actually are doing our deep dive tomorrow as an admin team for Q2. So that will be something that we do focus in on, and looking at the trends from first quarter to second quarter, and which would be that October date of 95 to 92. So that's definitely something to take into consideration.
I think one of the things that that we need to look at is the vaccination rate by race, because I am finding that there are higher percentages of white students that are fully vaccinated as compared to other racial demographic groups, along with students without IEPs compared to students with IEPs, English language learners, non-English language learners compared to English language learners. And so we've done several rounds of outreach to families regarding, opportunities to engage in receiving the vaccine, but we still see a lot of hesitation by some of our families, which is impacting attendance, because anytime there's a contact in the classroom, non-vaccinated students are quarantined, which then impacts the attendance rate, especially that first day until students then engage virtually. So that was like the next layer that I wanted to share, so that we could look at vaccination rates by race, by EL, by I.
So the way you calculate these ratios is the number of days that students were present over the number of days that they should be present. Is that what it is?
Okay, so a couple of staffing updates. One is that Madison Rhodes is actually the candidate that was hired for our 8th grade inclusion position. Mr. Vasquez accepted a position at a different CPS school and left as of January 28th. And so the team, along with parents, along with teachers, interviewed and we were able to hire, and the person was just staffed. She'll begin March 1st in the 8th grade inclusion position. And then we have 3 additional candidates that are in process of being staffed for our part-time positions, which is the people that are supporting lunch and recess. We've had a lot of turnover in our miscellaneous staff. I had 2 staff members. I feel like every time we make progress, people leave. So I had 2 staff members leave as I was like hiring these 3, and so we're still not fully staffed. But we're, doing the best that we can. But what that's meant is that a lot of our non-homeroom teachers, our assistant principals have been covering a lot of the lunches and recesses for students. In terms of a couple of school data points to make note of, one is that access testing is very close to being completed. Mr. Lerner, who's our bilingual lead teacher, has been leading those efforts, but a lot of classroom teachers have also been helping with testing. And that's the test that measures students' language proficiency for students that are second language learners. We've had 3 FCC violations over the last month, which is not a large number considering the size of our student population. And we continue to create individualized support plans for students as it's needed. Last month, there was a request to see demographic, what our data looks like for 504 plans, which are plans where students do not receive direct support from a special education teacher. And so I included that data in this slide. I talked about the student council focus group. Our 7th and 8th grade basketball teams are advancing to the finals. Girls play this Saturday, and then boys play the following weekend. And then both 5th and 6th grade boys and girls teams won their division last weekend. And our after-school programs continue. Kim and Sam are on the agenda for the IB evaluation meeting, but I just put the link to their presentation in here if folks want to reference it later on. And then these are some of the ways that we've engaged with families over the last month. Tomorrow morning, I'll have a virtual coffee with the principal. I believe it's at 9 a.m. For those that want an informal way to check in. And then I've listed some of the things that we focused on for professional development and grade levels with teachers over the last month. After the work stoppage, we realized that we needed to do more work with differentiating our grade level meetings, just given the culture and climate among the staff and sort of like external factors that are impacting teachers. And so we took a step back to look at what is it that teachers needed right now. And so that has differed based on different grade levels. The one thing that has been very consistent is the IB evaluation standards review, which Kim and Sam will also talk about. And then here are upcoming dates. I did want to make note that we are holding another round of vaccination clinics. March 7th is our next date. It's a great opportunity for those that want the booster or those that have not received the first vaccine or need the second vaccine. It will be another opportunity to have that here, and Shannon will be leading the vaccination event. One example, please, see one another. It has. We've had kids tell their families, "You need to get me vaccinated. I am tired of getting flipped. I want to be in school." Kids have been advocating. Yeah.
We had a conversation.
Okay, yeah, can we move? Let's move that.
Oh,
Well,
it's
it'll cause feedback, so we'll just move. It's easier to move the microphone. We'll move it over there. It doesn't need to be plugged in.
Is it not
No, I think it must not be like,
Mute.
I'll just,
You can mute
okay,
and then he can unmute.
okay, let's try that. I need to.
Sorry, everyone. I was just asking Ms. Amy and Mr. Michello if the kids are kind of, like, the kids will be motivated by hearing from one another's peers, and that my child was super excited about being vaccinated and can't wait to be boosted. And so I was wondering what examples, what we were doing to kind of encourage boosting that vaccination rate amongst the students, since, you know, hearing from your peer, another little person is more powerful than hearing that from an adult, perhaps, to help kind of move those vaccination numbers up.
Here, hold the button. Ready?
Which content?
Hold the two circles.
Link removed.
Do you see the two circles? Yeah, if you hold it down. Hold on, you have to hold it and then they have to talk to each other.
Linked.
Did yours say linked? It might be dead. Here, slip them.
You might need a.
So, now you hear it.
They're on. I just heard you.
Yeah, but
Oh.
it's, I need to update my.
Now can you hear me? So my recommendation, Ms. Amy, is that at the start of the school year, developing capacity repeat their session 1 of teaching for conscious equity, since so much time will have passed. And I really think the impact will be very different, having Dr. Fisher and her team in person versus the session being remote and having to pick up students and all of the things that she shared with you. So I'm not sure if that will be a consideration.
We've been talking about things that we can do like on our own within grade levels, because we need to do some follow-up to some of the sessions that she led. Like, it's been very like quick turnaround time with not a lot of time between the process and like reflect. And so there are things that we've already talked about wanting to do.
Your jacket.
That we want to do sort of like outside of her whole group sessions, but I will give her that feedback to see what her thoughts are.
I think I only caught part of what Evan's recommendation was about moving it to the fall.
Okay, so what I've said is that if we've looked at ways that we can engage in grade level meeting time or flex day time in the middle of now at the beginning of the school year. And ultimately, like, just doing a one and done is not the ideal. So like, these are all topics that we need to continue to reflect on and come back to forever. And so I'll talk to Dr. Fisher about that feedback to see, like, how does she maybe want to like incorporate some of that, or what should we do even prior to her next session? But I'm glad you brought that up, because those are similar things to what we've been saying, that we do need to go back and revisit some of the prior topics.
And hopefully that doesn't cause any feedback. Okay, does anyone have any other questions? Not yet. Okay, good.
I had emailed out the data from our students with IEPs and 504s. And then there aren't any current budget updates other than the district may be looking at changing the budgeting formula for next school year. They're doing a workshop for school leaders next week for us to, I'm not sure what, but it'll be an administrator summit, but I know that they wanted to look at current priority areas within the district, and they may be talking about budget at that point. They released like enrollment projections for next school year, and so they have predicted our enrollment to be at 934 students in kindergarten through eighth grade, which pre-pandemic we were at 993. And so I submitted a sort of appeal to that, asking for at least 20 students more but with the possibility of us actually having more than that, because the current graduating group of eighth graders is a class of about 90 students, whereas like the incoming group of kindergarteners generally is at 112 students. And so that would be a difference of 20 students that realistically would happen if there's no other changes of enrollment at other grade levels. But I'll keep you posted in terms of when budget will be released and, you know, any other updates as it relates to that.
Thank
And
you.
then there are no transfer of funds. I will make a motion to approve the internal accounts for the month of January.
This is dealing with the transfer of funds to federal funds. Do you have an idea what would that be for the funds that the federal government paid for? Yes.
Those funds, we have those funds.
So you have-
Yeah, and so some of that money went towards after-school programming, and some of it has gone towards substitutes for teachers to engage in like professional learning, and some of it went towards extended day pay for teachers to engage in professional development or team meetings.
I have two questions. Number one, do you know the breakout of tenured versus non-tenured teachers here?
In terms of the number of each,
Yeah.
yeah, I have that, but I don't have that in front of me. I can get that.
Curious.
Yep.
And then second, we were talking about like the budgeting formula and then talking about changing that. What's it based on right now? Is it just strictly attendance?
No,
What are their considerations or factors?
there's many different factors. So one of them is there's the per pupil funding, where there's $1 amount for students in K through 3 or 4, and then another dollar amount for students in 5 through 8. So we receive one allocation that's per pupil. We receive board funded positions, such as special education, pre-K, assistant, clerks, security. Like there's board funded positions that we receive that we don't vote on because they're just automatically assigned. Then we receive, depending on a poverty rate, like there may be additional funds based on poverty. Teachers receive like a stipend amount. So there's various funding sources that come to the school, but the biggest sort of form of funding comes from the per pupil allocation. But I don't know if they're gonna look at, I don't know what the district is gonna do. They may be doing nothing, but I don't know. But I know that like how we fund schools and looking at equity and funding schools has been an area of focus. We do receive additional positions because we're an IB school. We receive 4 board funded positions. We receive 1 assistant principal for the pre-K expansion that we engaged in. We decided to hire a second counselor out of school funded positions, but the district provides us with 1 counselor position funded by the district. So there's a variety of factors.
Thanks.
Any other questions? There is a motion to approve the internal accounts, but there was not a second. Okay, Aisha seconded. All those in favor of, and just to clarify, what month is this?
January.
January. Sorry. I was confused last time with all that other stuff. Okay, sorry. All those in favor? All those opposed? Abstaining? Not voting. Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is the safety committee update from Jerry. And to simplify things, I'm going to shut off this camera and just move that this computer over there.
Okay.
Well, here, okay.
Okay, can you guys hear me? Okay, all right, so the safety committee update is as follows. We continue to meet weekly, Friday mornings at 7:15. We had 1 person resign from the safety committee. We're currently looking for a representative from the SEIU union, so that we don't, it's not necessarily that we have to, but we would like that the person who resigned was on the SEIU, part of the SEIU union, so we'd like to have another voice from SEIU. In safety committee, we have been talking about the contacting tracing committee that will through CPS and CTU. We're still waiting for more guidance from the district for the contact tracing. We also have been talking about the testing. What ended up happening was Ms. DiMichello spoke with people at Thermo Fisher and the head of testing, and our testing date has been changed to Thursday. There should have been communication. There was communication sent out school-wide at the school-wide level that our new date is on Thursdays. Classroom teachers also were supposed to communicate that we will be getting tested on Thursdays. There were some testing hiccups at the branch. However, we were able to get an extra tester out there to test at the branch. What am I forgetting? Oh, the health screener. So we did a poll of the community to reinstate the health screener. We had 3 members of CTU on the committee vote no to reinstall the health screener based on the feedback we got. We had 1 member vote yes, so we decided not to reinstate the health screener. We have a meeting tomorrow morning for safety committee, and I think that is it, unless there's any questions.
I'm wondering about cleanliness, how that's been going.
Oh, like the cleanliness in general, or
I think that the other,
there was a bullet point for cleanliness, like.
yeah, I think that's later on in the meeting.
Sorry.
This is just.
No. So, yep, that's the update with the safety committee, unless I forgot. Did I forget anything?
Nope, you didn't.
Nope. All right. I'm gonna mute myself now.
It's no way.
Any other discussion, questions for the safety committee? No? Okay, moving on to the next item on the agenda, the IB evaluation process. We can't, there.
Sam, were you going to present?
One sec, yep.
That I was muted. Sorry.
Sam, do you want me to pull it up on my computer? Because I have it in my presentation.
Oh, nope, here it comes. Great. So good evening, everyone. I'm Kimberly Leibovitz. I'm the primary years program coordinator, working primarily with pre-K through 5th grade. And Sam is the middle years program coordinator, working primarily with 6th through 8th grade as the coordinator, as the assistant principal with 5th through 8th grade. A little confusing, I know. I'm here to go through our, give an update and explain kind of where we are and headed in a trajectory of our program evaluation. So as an IB school, we are required to go through IB evaluation every 5 years. And so we will be doing that in conjunction with Sun High School this year with their middle years program and diploma program. Next slide, please. So where are we now? So we've been working diligently in the review and revision process of our units for the last few years, actually, but really diligently with the rewriting and revision process for the last 6 months. So next slide, please. This gives an overview of kind of where we are now. We're in winter 2021-22. We are working on now just reflection and refinement of units. The middle years program is turning in their building quality curriculum report in shortly. And we have begun meeting with some internal stakeholders on the beginning to review the IB standards and practices. So we started in our IB evaluation committee, which contains teachers from across the building, from PYP and MYP. And then we began with the last professional development day by meeting with larger groups of teachers vertically. So meaning a combination of maybe a kindergarten, a 3rd grade, a 7th grade, and a specialist and our SICAs and support staff. So we did that at the last professional development day and then have continued that into our grade level meetings this past couple weeks and looking at reviewing the IB standards and practices, what they mean for Peirce, where we are with those standards and practices. This review is a part of what's known as the self-study, and I'll go into that in a little bit. So coming up next, we're going to be looking at, oh, go back one slide. Sorry. Coming up next, we're going to be turning in all of our preliminary documentation, which is a lot of paperwork, basically. And that's going to be due in April. And then we'll move into the self-study. And so let's give an overview now of what we've accomplished over the last several months. In the last few months, starting back in January 2020, so before this whole pandemic thing started, we began with a review of standards in social studies and science across all grade levels, pre-K through 8th grade. And then we moved to reviewing all of our standards across all subject areas in all grade levels. We've also did a deep dive into the Learn for Justice, social justice standards. We began that deep dive in the fall of 2020 and continued through spring of 2021. And then with the review and revision of our units, we were planning explicit teaching and learning, and more information on what that looks as it's connected to the different unit plans will be forthcoming. we did unit revision. You can kind of see where we are with that within the primary years program of inquiry. And then we also reviewed policies. There are 4 required policies at the in a PYP or MYP or diploma program school. Those 4 policies are the language policy, the assessment policy, the access and inclusion policy, and the academic integrity policy. And so we did a review and revision of all 4 of those policies. We presented those policies to staff and had them also review them and provide feedback. And within this next section of the ask that we're going to be asking of all of you and the wider school community, it will be a review of those as well. Okay, next slide, please. And Sam, of course, jump in if you have anything to add. Okay, so this is an overview of what it means to go through an IB school improvement cycle. So every year we create an action plan. It's based on the report currently based on the report we received for authorization or the previous evaluation. And then we go into implementation of that action plan, reviewing that action plan every year. And then where we are now is the going into the self-study. So that's the review of the standards and practices. And then we have our evaluation visit. We get another report, we create another action plan, and the cycle just continues. Next slide, please. So what is the self-study? This is the place where we get to engage our entire school community on how we are doing in the implementation of the program standards and practices. We identify our major achievements over the last 5 years, and we look at creating a plan moving forward for the next implementation period. And we do that through a program development plan. Next slide. And so our purpose for this is to, as I stated previously, is to assess where we are. How are we doing within each standard and practice? What are the things that we are excelling at? What are the things we still need to improve upon? And how can we, what are the ways that we want to look at doing those things? So what are the suggestions to make improvements or to make this standard and practice better? And for us here at Peirce, that's with our primary years program and our middle years program. But we also look at that again in conjunction with Sen High School, because we are partners with them through our middle years program. And then also the diploma program and soon to be career related program at Sen. So we will be having a full IB World School Continuum school visit in November, November 7th through 9th. And through that visit, they will, a few of you might have been a part of it originally, but through that visit, they will talk to everyone and visit all 3 buildings. So, and there'll be more information about that coming down the pipe. Next slide, please. So this gives just a brief overview of what the program standards and practices are. They are the foundational set of principles for schools and the IB to ensure quality and fidelity in the implementation of the programs. And I'm not going to read through the whole framework, but it is the big things to hit on is that it helps us have a shared purpose. It gives us a place to develop our learning environments, ensure dynamic school culture, and create student learning experiences that have the highest quality possible. So that's what the purpose and the principle behind those program standards and practices are. Next slide. So where do we need your support? We are looking for stakeholders, so family members, to join us in reviewing the IB standards and practices. We will be meeting a few times throughout March, April, and May with during and after school options. And there will be a mini application process basically stating that you would like to join us in this endeavor and that what your time availability is. So we would really like to have as many family members as possible be a part of this process and review these standards and practices with us. Next slide. And so we'd like that, we'll send this out in other communication as well over the next couple of days. But there's a form that you can click on to complete, which is the application for joining us in the review of the standards and practices. And then on the next slide, you'll find our information for myself and Mr. Lee. And as always, we welcome any questions you might have and are open to questions now if that's happening. Thank you all for taking the time to listen in and join us on this great journey.
Hi, Kim, I had a quick question for you. Sorry, I was wondering, the forms to participate, are we sent, maybe I don't, sorry if you said this, but are we sending home backpack mail as well for families that might not be? Okay,
I plan on printing those and sending those home as well.
great, thank you.
So Kim, in that process of reviewing the IB standards and practices, is the idea to give input? Like, what are you looking for besides the review of those practices, which I think will be informative for whoever joins, right? Like to do a deeper dive. Is there an action step that's going to come out of that or input of some sort? Yeah, can you say?
Yeah, so what'll happen is basically first we say yes or no, is this practice in place? And then we have a discussion around the evidence that tells us that it's in place, or what are the suggestions that you might have for making it in place if it's not, or leading it, because we rate it in 3 different categories, either developing, developed, or highly developed. And so if we're not at that highly developed, what would get us there? What are some suggestions you might have to get us there? We absolutely want those suggestions.
Already?
We're doing the 25th.
So that, hey, Kim, thank you so much for doing this. A couple questions. I think you said that the interest forms or application forms and whatnot, they're due next week. Is that it?
Yeah.
And I apologize. How is this being shared? Is it through the parent communications or how can we help sort of socialize that?
Yeah, so it's gonna go out in the parent newsletters, and then it'll also go out backpack mail.
And the second question is, and perhaps this is too early, but from your standpoint, I mean, you've been doing this for a while. Are there you think we really like thinking about as we going through the evaluation process?
I don't have any major red flags that I can see right now. I think we'll be great, but there's always going to be, so what happens is when you get the report back from the International Baccalaureate, they come back to you with 3 categories: commendations, which are all the great things that you're doing as they relate to the standards and practices. Everything is related back to a standard or practice. Recommendations, things they think that maybe you can do better, and here's their recommendation for how to do that. And then matters to be addressed. Matters to be addressed are those things that we have to address immediately. They are connected to a standard and practice and usually the required things that need to be in place. And if it's not in place, they'll come back to you with exactly what they want to see from you, and with a date to have that done by. So they're not serious, like it's serious, but it's not, they're not going to take our accreditation from us. So we will not all of a sudden not be an IB school anymore. we will be an IB school. Otherwise, I'm not doing my job correctly. So I'm not making sure that the fidelity of the program is standing strong. So, but we will have an IB program at our school always. Well, as far as I'm concerned. But those are the 3 categories that they come back to us with. And so we make changes if they ask us to make changes, and then we move forward.
Just one question. The elephant in the room, the pandemic. How is the pandemic going to affect our evaluation process?
So we're moving forward. It will be an in-person evaluation. Having been a site, I do site visits for the IB, and having been a site visitor on virtual evaluations, I'm very grateful that ours is going to be in person because they're a whole different beast. And I don't see it hindering us because our teachers have put in so much work into the revision and rewriting of units and to making the curriculum at the school the best it possibly can be for our students. And then there's all the other factors. So it's not just about the curriculum, but then about how are we engaging our students in the learner profile attributes, and how are we ensuring that they are becoming globally minded citizens who can go out into the world and take action. And I think we see that often with our students on ways that they want to take action in the community based on their learning. And so I don't think the pandemic is going to hinder us that much when it comes to evaluation. So
Okay, thank you.
that's my opinion.
Any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you. Oh, Aisha has one more question, sorry.
I'm just wondering, as you're looking for participation with the form, how, looking through that lens of equity, ensuring that representation, for the parents and the community that are involved, like, what does that look like to make sure that those underrepresented voices are part of the conversation?
I don't think our form asks for age or race or anything like that. So that's a good question. And maybe that's something we need to think about adding in. But what we are looking for is it does ask for grade level bands because we are looking for a wide swath of people across all grade levels. So yeah.
Sorry, Kim, can you repeat the very beginning of that, of your answer? We didn't hear it.
Oh, I had said that our current form isn't asking for any kind of demographics information. And so that could be something that Sam and I discussed before sending it out to possibly add into our form, but we are looking for a wide swath of people across multiple grade levels because we don't want everybody coming from just our primary grades or just our middle grades or just our upper grades. We do want a wide group of people.
So if it's a wide group of people who respond by grade, we won't know within the grade who, like, the demographics of who responded, correct?
Not from the current form, no.
Okay, I think that's a concern for me, and I'm seeing some head nodding on the council, and I don't know what the process is for this year, but we can.
I think that initially is a question to see who is sort of self-opting in. And I think it would be important to ask if families have a student with an IEP or a student that's enrolled in the bilingual program as well. And then once we see who is sort of self-selected, where do we see gaps? And then where might we want to intentionally target to invite in families to ensure that we've got representation across demographic and other focus groups within our school. I think that's easy to do, and I think that's what you were maybe saying, Kim, is that adding that question in.
Yeah.
one way of collecting that information. I
Yeah.
also, as you're doing that, it would be important to understand also, like, as we're looking at like the racial identity of families, do we have like parents who are one race raising a child of another race? And then parents, of one race who are raising children of the same race? I think that would be important information to collect as well.
Yeah, and we can easily update the form. It hasn't been sent out yet, so we can easily update the form and to include that information.
Thank you, Kim. Sorry. Sorry, I'll let you unmute.
I just want to make sure that I'm hearing it correctly. So we are going to add it in before those, that demographic information, as Ms. Zamy explained, before it goes out.
Yeah.
Before the application goes out.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we need to move the timeline in terms of due date and stuff in order to get that correctly in there, then that can absolutely happen as well. So we had a quick turnaround on it so we could get going on the meetings, as we have deadlines for the self-study. So that was the reasoning behind that. But absolutely, we can do that. I can't hear.
Their guidance is very broad. It left to a lot of interpretation at the school level. But I think because the context of schools are so different, but I think what's important to us at Peirce is that we have representation across a variety of demographics.
So before we move on, I think that I feel like we need to acknowledge what's happening here. And I think that it's that we're catching this like at the last minute. And I think that it's so not to say that we don't appreciate the work that Kim and Mr. Lee and Principal Zamy has done, but just to recognize that trying to capture the demographic data as an afterthought is a failure on our part as a community. And I think that it needs to be said out loud, and that when we do these types of things in general, that it needs to not be an afterthought anymore, because it's really painful for people, and it causes harm. It makes me feel bad. It makes me feel terrible, and it adds to and this is not singling out Kim or Mr. Lee or anybody, but Black families don't feel heard. And this is one of the things that leads, not leads them to think that, like, this is the reality. So I just had to say that before we moved on, which is, once again, not to say that we don't appreciate the work that's being done, but it's painful to me to, that if Aisha hadn't asked at the last second, that it would have been missed.
Could I add something to that?
Yes.
I think that beyond self-selection for things like this, like voluntary participation and in focus groups and other, family participation opportunities, it should be a matter of course to be extending that invitation and to make sure that people who are not generally well represented in the community are asked to participate. I think that's part of doing the work, is recognizing the inherent anti-Black, anti-POC bias in the structure of what we're doing, and to actively recruit for that. And I mean, I would include, families who don't speak English at home and all of those folks, like, who outside of the nice white parents and the educated parents and the parents who are middle class and have time to be involved. We need to make things a lot more accessible for them. And this is not just, I'm not coming after Kim or Mr. Lee or the IB process. This is like a general Peirce comment. And just, the self-selection part was just kind of sticking in the wrong way for me. So just wanted to add that.
And just to talk about the systemic nature of this, I was going to save this for the back report, but at the back meeting, there was the mother of an English learner student who was there, who called us all out for not making more inroads with the Spanish speaking community at the school. And as someone who was in attendance and as the chair of the LSC, I tried to take responsibility for that, as did Mariela and the back committee. And so it's not just Kim, it's not just, it's a systemic thing. So once again, we're not singling anybody out, and we appreciate the work that everyone does, but it's hard and it's intentional.
And I think, Javier, to that, looking at like our action planning process with Dr. Fisher, one of the things that we're developing an action step around is around parent communication, especially with yeah, making sure that we are doing that intentional outreach. And so I think this is, I mean, this is a clear example of how we see it happening. We know that it's an issue, but yet we didn't plan on the front end for it. And so I think I appreciate you calling that out. And I think it's an opportunity for us to continue to reflect and grow and acknowledge that we need to do better.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
I just want to say thank you, Javi, thank you, Aisha, for bringing this up, and Ms. Amy and Cam and Mr. Lee. Having these conversations are important for us to move those needles as we're talking about impact. And thank you for receiving that feedback in the spirit in which it was attended to make us a better community. So thank you all.
It's a collective effort.
Yep.
And can I also just add, I think it's really helpful when we have these very specific instances to name, because sometimes it's hard to like hear feedback that's not very specific, and this is extremely specific and very like, it's real, like this is real to what we've been seeing, but then this is a real context to where we see it playing out.
Anyone else? Okay. Seeing none, the next item on the agenda is old business. First sub-item is update on the vote on the equity committee. Aisha, I was going to ask you, and I will unmute. Sam?
Javi, I was going to give a quick update, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm Sandra Kafarkas. I'm part of the selection committee alongside Aisha Noble and Sam Lee. And this is our update. The selection committee recognizes moving forward with the current compressed recruitment timeline puts additional strain on and potentially discourages those in underrepresented communities wishing to be considered for the LSC Equity Subcommittee. As a result, the selection committee has adjusted the recruitment timeline to allow for more community outreach in order to fulfill its commitment towards ensuring equitable representation on the LSC Equity Committee. Candidate interest forms are now due back to the selection committee by Wednesday, February 23rd, whereas before it was February 9th. Once interviews are completed, the selection committee will convene to review all interested candidates and make a recommendation to the LSC and the community members asked to join the equity committee. On or before the LSC's regular meeting on March 17th, the council will discuss and vote on whether to approve the selection committee's recommendation. We anticipate the equity committee's training with Dr. Fisher and developed capacity will take place into mid-late March.
Thank you, Sandra. I appreciate that, especially given what we just discussed. Any other questions or Trey also appreciates that. Any other questions or discussion around this? Then moving on to the next item, on the agenda, correction to the bylaws. I can speak to this unless Aisha wants to. When we updated the bylaws in September, we accidentally, I think it was a section 3. It should have been under section 6, and we put it under section 3 because we didn't share the updated text within 10 days. We're not going to vote on it at this meeting, but I wanted to bring it to everyone's attention, and we'll be sure to share the updated text and vote on it at the next LSC meeting to correct it. Okay. The last item of the agenda, last item in old business is discussion regarding distribution of fundraising. And I added this onto the agenda. So the impetus for this item on the agenda was that we approved fundraising for the Fall Fest, and we approved the estimated profit for that would have been $600. And so the actual profit from that ended up being $3,800. And personally, as a member of the LSC, I wasn't sure. So the use that we voted on was for shirts for athletics of people who couldn't afford it. So I just wanted to get clarification. It started out wanting to get clarification on what that meant. Did we vote on a blanket, all that money going to shirts, or did we vote on just $600? And so it's a question about clarification on what was spent on the apparels and what the remainder of that money is being spent on. But I think since our meeting last Thursday, I was able to attend the FOP meeting on Tuesday, and I think I want to expand it a little bit more just to get a clarification on how the fundraising is handled and how it's requested and how that is distributed. And also try to just get aligned on how fundraising should be handled. I got the impression from so I was at the FOP meeting on Tuesday, and they wanted to do some fundraising at the school, but they like self-censored themselves from doing that fundraising because they felt like they had to come to the LSC, and that would add a difficulty. So I just what I want to know is, so there's that level. There's also the wanting to know, so my understanding is that Principal Zamy identifies the needs and then requests the FOP for donations. So I know that one of the needs is of basketball backboards that need to be replaced. But I also feel that as members of the local school council, that if there are needs at the school, that we should be notified of those needs. So I'm wondering how those needs are communicated to the FOP, and if they're documented in any way, and if we can have that documentation shared with us. And then there's also, they voted to have a move-a-thon on Tuesday, and that was, so that is going to be taking place at the school with the children raising the funds. So I wanted to start that conversation early about what those funds would be used for and where those funds were going to be going. So that's a lot, but I wanted to give Principal Zamy a chance to speak to some of that first.
So which one do you want to start?
I don't know. So I told you that I would email Office of LSC Relations, and I didn't get any response from them about the difference in the funds. So if we can start with what.
So on the fund, so we voted specifically about the fundraising shirt, like about the t-shirts for the event. And then we also had said custodial expenses.
That was for a second fundraiser.
For the second one, correct.
Right.
And so what's recorded on the form is, that would go into it was like to the sports, to the athletic line. It says funds to be used indirectly to support the school. That was the way that it said, that it read on the form, but we had said in like our meeting that we wanted it to go towards like the t-shirts of students. And so that money would go into the athletic, the sports line. No. So that it's any money raised from that event goes into that line because it's just an anticipated revenue. You may not raise anything. Right. You may raise 20 times what you expected. So it's just that they're anticipating this, but we've chosen to allocate those funds to athletics. The council can then say like, okay, we've received X number of dollars more. We want to like have a discussion about possibly rerouting those funds to a different funding source. So like the council has the ability to like re-vote on budget at any point. It's who brings up the need for the vote to discuss it. Is it brought up by a parent? Is it brought up by a teacher? Is it brought up by administrator? Like who's initiating that conversation? I've generally initiated that conversation, but it doesn't have to be me. Like when we voted in the spring on this year's budget, we chose to move money from internal accounts into a budget line to cover like supplies because our budget showed a shortfall. And so we pulled that money from multiple accounts and chose to reallocate how those funds are spent. So we have the flexibility at any point to reallocate funds, which is, you know, the nice thing about the council. So it's like X number of dollars is projected, but then this is what is raised. It's deposited into that account, but we can move it as we see fit. So I guess I'll pause there as it relates to like that first point to see if there's additional questions.
Just a point of clarification.
Just a point of clarification, so I understand. So is the process that any money raised after approval by FOP, all funds raised are going to is ours, is the schools?
That's correct.
Okay,
That's
so,
correct.
okay.
And then on top of that, once those funds are deposited, they don't need to be spent by the end of the school year. We don't have that
The
pressure.
district does want you to spend all internal accounts by the end of the year.
That's right.
Not been the reality in majority of schools.
Okay, yeah, that's helped. Yeah, 'cause now I recall what Luis shared, I can't remember his last name, about spending the funds in the current school year because of the expectation with
The challenge is that then you
families.
start the next school year with nothing
Mhm.
versus like starting with something.
And just to clear, so anytime a community member or parent wants to fund a project or after-school program or any need or extracurricular activity, they can petition for those funds to be used by whatever raised by the FOP. Is there any limitations?
Years past, I provided, like it's been sort of like based on multiple things going on. When we've had budget shortfalls, it's been FOP. These are things that we're short in that we really need. These are high priority items, and these are things that I'm requesting. We've prioritized arts partnerships, teacher stipends. Like there's some like annual things that we've always allocated funds towards. And so based on like how I've seen the school, like I've put together that proposal. But there's been, you know, a call for like families want to be more engaged in that process, and that's something that FOP has talked about, and we've talked about it in past, like how can we solicit input from the community, like what are things that the community is seeing of high priority. And so that's like FOP would need to like engage the community in that way to see, like, what are the things that you see as important projects? Like, is it X number of dollars is gonna be determined by the school and X number of dollars is by the parents, or is it a combination of efforts? But that's the direction that we'd like to move it. So generally I've provided like a projected scope. They've told me how much money they have, how much they've anticipated in fundraising. And we've talked through, some of the needs of the school. We haven't done that in 2 years because of the pandemic. I have presented nothing to them. In terms of the basketball hoops, that was actually approved, I think, 2 years ago,
Right.
pre-pandemic. And we put a hold on it, just like we had put a hold on the hand washing stations, which had been approved, just because we didn't know when kids were going to be returning. FOP didn't want to necessarily deplete funding sources without having new funding sources coming in. And so the basketball hoops was actually pre us being shut down.
Okay, and that was something that that FOP did talk about. So I have Fran's hand is up, but also Jerry. So I'll let Jerry speak and then Fran.
I may not be able to answer this in terms of equity from all of our families. For FOP, a lot of the fundraisers, like the fall fest, stuff like that.
Can we, I can't hear Jerry. Sorry. Can you?
Sorry.
I had a question in reference to FOP. I don't know if you'll be able to answer this, but in talking about equity and access for all of our families, when we do these fundraisers like the Fall Fest and different festivals, there is an admittance fee, right? Like you have to pay to get in. Is that correct? So you don't have to have a cap. Is everything accessible for everyone who attends if they don't have the cash? Like, are there prizes, games, or what have you? Is that are all of our families included in that if they can't make that donation? I just was thinking while we were talking about that.
That's a good question. I don't know. I wasn't at the Fall Fest, but I think that that is a valid question to discuss when planning fundraisers.
We're putting equity at our forefront of our plans. Like we think that because we are fortunate schools to have FOP and do these things where some schools don't even have one. So let's just make sure that we're making it accessible for all.
I think Bill might be having a hard time hearing again. Yeah.
Can you just summarize or what
Saying
Jerry
is
said?
that when we have fundraisers, are we centering equity and making sure that we're not paying for attendance or paying for participating isn't a barrier? And it's a good.
And while we're there, because I know there's refreshments and stuff, right? Like I know you can buy some more refreshments and stuff and what have you. So if we have to figure out a way, this is really what we're trying to do. Like we have to figure out a way to include those families in a way where it doesn't bring attention to them, but yet they can participate in a fully inclusive environment.
And Jerry's also bringing up refreshments for the families who can't pay for them, and I think that's valid, and I would agree with that. And thank you for bringing it up. So I know that Fran's hand was up. I see that Lauren, who's in attendance, has her hand up, but this isn't public participation. If you want to save those comments for public participation, but I will note that hands are up for that. Fran?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that I understood correctly that Miss Amy, you're suggesting that the FOP should be in charge of determining parent preferences for fundraising or for allocation of funds. Like, because I feel like there's no FOP is not ethically bound to include everyone. They are only, it's a voluntary organization. They can include anyone that they want to include. And they're a separate 501c3 is my understanding. So I think it would be more appropriate for that conversation and those directives to come from some kind of official mechanism within Peirce itself, unless I'm misunderstanding something.
I I just have hesitation in engaging, and so Friends of Peirce is a separate organization. They work with the school to support initiatives at the school. But they have talked about wanting to shift the way that they're seeking input. And so I think it's important that Friends of Peirce does that, to like look at ways that they can ensure equity of voice and like support in the decision making. I'd be curious what families would like to see from the school's end.
Sorry, before you speak, Trey, let me see. I was at the FOP meeting on Tuesday, and Chad is beginning, the president of the FOP, Chad Curry, is beginning to bring up those discussions within the FOP board to kind of take a look at what they're funding and how they're making the decisions on what is funded. So that process has been beginning, and I want to acknowledge that. And there was tense, uncomfortable discussions at the FOP board because not everyone agrees with that. So, but Chad is organizing a public meeting to get public input on what the process should be. So I think that those discussions are being had. I definitely welcome them, and it sounds like Principal Zamey also thinks that's a direction that acknowledging that they don't have a formal relationship with the school. They're an independent 501(c)(3), but I'll take that back, because technically, as a parent, all the parent reps are members of FOP. So we can, so even though Principal Zamey doesn't have a formal relationship with the Friends of Peirce, the parent reps do.
I want to get sort of what Claire was saying in terms of like, how can I seek input from families and then make recommendations to Friends of Peirce? I'll give like an example. I feel like there's some things that do land in my area, but then I feel like there's some things that don't land in my area. And so an example of something that I think is very like real is that when we were engaging in our budget process maybe 3 years ago, and we encountered a budget deficit, we were faced with, do we continue our partnership with Playworks, or do we use those funds for something else? And so I had surveyed the parent community on what do they see as priority areas, and then made the recommendation based on input from families to Friends of Peirce that said like X percentage of people, expressed interest in this and X percentage expressed interest in this. I'm open to like thinking through that a little bit more. I guess I'm most interested in hearing like the school budget that is allocated by the district. How do families want to allocate those funds? That to me is like a high priority that I am like obligated to engage with families and staff to determine that allocation.
I'm sorry, I don't want to be annoying, but I feel like there's also an obligation to the funds that you get from the Friends of Peirce if you are using them for the school.
Just to support and piggyback what Claire, I think is bringing up, I second what Claire says. It feels like there's a lot of power in the Friends of Peirce's hands to whether or not to fund certain things or not, because there's some gray areas there. So it feels as if those decisions to fund certain things are subjective. Whether or not that they are, it feels as if, because there's no real guidelines as to how, or communicated guidelines as to how things get funded with money that's raised. Friends of Peirce is able to raise that money because they're using the Peirce market as a tool to support and supplement educational, extracurricular activities in our name. And so if they're using that name, it feels as if the community and the parents should have a say. Otherwise, it should, I would question, why are they our name? You don't have any authority.
Right. And so that's where the Friends of Peirce is coming to the local school council and requesting approval for fundraising events. And then the council then votes to approve or not. That becomes like the local governing body's engagement, and it's not me like as principal only, right? Like that's like a collective space for that. And so I think in years past, there has not been like for all fundraising events brought to the LSC by FOP. And so I think that like that's what we're now seeing happen. And so I think like using this space to determine the allocation of funds, like is where like I can identify like the t-shirts, for example. PE teacher was saying, it would be nice if we could just provide these for students. This event, came up and it seemed like a real good partnership. And so then that was something that was discussed here and voted on to approve. So I feel like using this space is a way to resolve some of like those conflicts.
Sorry, Principal Amy, would you mind staying muted? Because otherwise it creates the feedback.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah, I think that I feel like we're talking along the same lines. So I think that because we haven't been, part of it is the pandemic, but my sense is that it wasn't happening even before the pandemic, where these issues, these needs weren't being brought to the LSC. So what I would like to see happen is that, so these needs that the FOP will fund, they can be brought to the LSC. The LSC can, in general, approve fundraising for the needs, and then the FOP can propose events to just hit cancel. Thank you. So like the backboards is, I know that it's a 2 years ago thing, but that's something that if it had been brought to the local school council, we could have approved the fundraising, and then they could have planned around that. Does that make sense?
You're saying to raise additional funds?
No, just in general. So like the t-shirts were like an afterthought. We had to make a decision to approve the event, and it was done, and we just accepted it. I think we think that as oversight, we would like to hear about these needs earlier, have the opportunity to approve fundraising for the needs, and then the FOP can raise those monies. And I think that I don't have a strong opinion about what, I know that, we can call a motion to reallocate those $3,200. And for me, it's not about those $3,200. I don't know the needs as well as you do. It's just, I want to make sure these conversations are being had and that they're being brought to this space. And I'm interested in what other LSC members think about that.
I agree. I'd like to understand the process. This is not to infer or suggest that there's anything nefarious or underhanded going on. It just feels like the justification at times have changed depending on what's being proposed and what's being suggested for support. And so what I'm hearing clear, well, I don't want to speak for clear, but what I'd like to see is what's the process? Who has ownership? Who has final authority to support or direct funds that are raised by FOP if they're used, for extracurricular or academic purposes? What's the parameters out there? And I'd like to have those parameters develop with more community input. Parents, community reps, even teachers. We should, they're fundraising in our name, so the community should be a part of that.
So are there folks that are part of the council that would like to work on what
Sorry, can you repeat
You
that?
didn't hear that.
Wondering if there are like members of the council that want to like start creating like some guidelines or ways that you'd like to see that relationship become a little bit more formalized.
I think so. I think so. I purposefully didn't add any motions to this, just so that I feel like this is the beginning of a conversation. And in the discussions, informal discussions I've had with Chad, he's open to what I was talking about, which is Principal Amy identifies the needs, or other entities through community input identifies the needs. The LSC approves the fundraising, and the FOP can do the fundraising for those needs. Is there? Sorry, I seem hesitant.
No, I'm not hesitant. It's just OP has their own board and then they decide how they're gonna, like, they decide if they're gonna approve it or not.
Right. So, okay. So what I
there's sort
mean
of like
is,
multiple layers of approval there.
right. So I totally see that, but I also know that yes, I
So
think,
like the LSC is approving a fundraiser.
right.
And not all fundraisers that FOP does, but like ones that like specifically are on school grounds.
Right.
And that are like targeting like very intentionally, like if we're putting a flyer in a kid's backpack.
Right.
Like those are like ways that.
So I think, yes, you are correct. The LSC can approve fundraising, and the FOP is free to say that they're not going to fundraise for that particular thing because they are their own independent. There's the way that they've set themselves up is the 501(c). They collect money, they make donations, and they are perfectly capable of doing that. But I think I'm not going to assume that the FOP won't fundraise for needs that the principal has identified and that the LSC has approved.
Say that last part again, that they won't what?
So the administration, you as the principal are identifying the needs. The LSC is approving fundraising for that. And then it's on the FOP to accept or decline to fundraise for that.
Correct, correct.
And I think that's
The other thing to keep in
because,
mind-
sorry, before we move on, because the school can also fundraise for itself.
Correct.
And any third party can also fundraise. It's not just the FOP that can be doing fundraising. I know that it's like this isn't a direction we'd want to move, but like there are groups that do fundraising for a service fee.
Correct.
So do you know what I'm saying? So Principal Amy identifies the need, LSC approves the fundraising. And then if FOP can decline, we still have the option of raising funds outside of the FOP.
Correct. The other thing to keep into consideration is like, we'll have people that say, I'm gonna donate $5,000 to the school, we want it to go towards this. And so the school will receive donations from like people that are not affiliated with FOP, but then FOP could also say, we are making a donation to the school specifically for this. So like, that's another layer that sort of.
But in that case, it's not you identifying a need. It is them identifying a need that they want to cover. And so that's totally different from what so if the FOP or any other group were to do that, that would be them doing this and not coming from the school. Yes, you can ask a question.
I don't know, this is a lengthy conversation and I don't know where it's stemming.
So it was stemming from the fact that, sorry, make sure that, so there was the Fall Fest where we approved the funding. And so we approved a certain amount. And so like, that was an impetus to have this conversation about fundraising in general. But then we also have the FOP approved move-a-thon, which is something that in the past has brought in tens of thousands of dollars. And it happens at the school. It's the children who are raising the money. So, this happened with the Fall Fest, and it's gonna happen again with the Move-a-thon, and the amount of money that we're talking about is magnitudes larger. So I wanna have this discussion now and not have it later. There's no, I mean, there is, not speaking, there was tension at the meeting, but there was some tension in the meeting. One of the tension that involves us and me is that they wanted to do fundraising at the school and they felt like they couldn't because they had to come to the LSC. So it felt like they were leaving money on the table and not doing events because of the LSC. And I just wanted to clarify that if there's needs identified, the LSC will approve the fundraising, and there isn't tension from the LSC, right? That like we've had 3 fundraisers come and we've approved them all. We haven't questioned what they were being used for, but we are performing our oversight by following up on the money that was on the allocation and how that was being spent. Sorry, does that answer your question? Sorry, no.
It's very accessible and it's not as easy with the CPS, and like as a teacher, I think it's super most, like knowing that $150 there. You send your receipt, you get it, and it's accessible, so.
Yep.
Like, we're talking about, it's something that I hope that stays.
No, and I love.
There's benefits from that. That's the part that I think is coming out of what you're saying.
No, and I understand that, and I don't think that's what we're talking about, because I know that Ms. Thompson also went to the FOP and asked them for funding for the musical, and they did, and I think that's great. Hazel's Little Red Riding Hood. I definitely don't have $1,500 for that, so I think that's great. But I think that if there is tension, but that's like, you know, there's whatever they reimburse the teachers for. There's whatever spent on the garden. There's whatever spent on the musical. But then there's also tens of thousands of dollars which is like, as someone who's liable for that, like if as the chair of the LSC, if someone comes to me and says $20,000 were raised on the school by the children, what happened to that money? I want to have an answer. Like, I don't know what other risk other people have taken in the past, but me, that's not on me. Never. I'm a rule follower. I do not need any drama. So that's part of what is going on here, right? And so I think it's great that Ms. Thompson can go, you know, like, I know Rep is asking for some for some support, and that's different, right? Those are conversations, but you know.
So what I think that you're saying is you want when FOP comes to us with a fundraising or fundraiser form, you want to have an in-depth conversation about where that money is going to fall in the budget.
Right. I want to have that conversation. Like these are conversations we can have right now, right? We know that thousands of dollars are going to come from the fundraising for Move-a-thon. So like, what are the needs? You know, that we have months ahead of time to, what are the needs that the school has? The LSC can approve that. Whether it's collected online or single dollar bills, not my problem, right? If it were a third party fundraiser, not my concern, but that we're having the discussions and that we're clear on our oversight role and that no one's going to come after me later for what happened with these tens of thousands of dollars.
And it's also here to say that opportunity now to engage in a way that we engage with other stakeholders who are impacted by this.
Right, and that's, yeah, and that's a conversation that's happening outside of us. Outside of what's happening at this meeting, that's a conversation that's happening, and principal, I support it. Trey supports it. Matthew's against it. I don't know why. Just kidding. But as far as what we're responsible for, which is the oversight in the budget, this is the conversation that I wanted to have. And it's only the first step, but yeah, I think it's important to have it.
Thank you,
we've
Javi. I
been-
just wanted to say thank you for bringing that up because that has been feedback that I've heard from parents
Sorry,
continually.
are you, okay.
Sorry, thank you for bringing up this topic because this is feedback that I've received throughout the years from families that they wanted to be able to participate in the process. They want to understand just the money that was raised, where it's being allocated to. It's a mystery. But I think it's important as a community that, you know, and I think last year, you know, I saw that FOP sent out, I think, a survey or something, and that's for me, seeing that for those families is like definitely a step in the right direction. How do we continue to incorporate and make sure that we are, you know, or FOP is, you know, centering kind of those underrepresented voices, and that we are being as inclusive as possible so that families feel seen and heard, versus what I've heard in the past was this kind of siloed, families felt excluded from that process, and that it was a core group, a small group of people that were making that decision on where these funds were going that were raised in the community. So I'm glad that we're having this conversation because we have an obligation as LSC members, you know, to uphold the law. And part of that is oversight over the school budget and fundraising. So I think to your point, going back to, I'm a rule follower as well. So I want to be able to answer that question as well. Like where are the funds going? What is the purpose? If there's a need, please let us know. I support, you know, making sure that we're addressing it.
I feel like we've been having a lot of conversation here at the school. Is there any discussion from LSC members remotely? Not seeing any sentiment. Oh, sorry. Yes, Bill.
Well, I mean, I think I've gotten it, but part of what I was a little bit looking for was, as the note taker, was some clarity around, and I think the last couple of comments, particularly what you just said, Aisha, was helpful, and Javi at the end there. But am I right that we've kind of covered a couple of different topics here? And it feels like part of what we're looking for is a little bit more clarity. And I guess maybe a suggestion that I would make is that maybe we make this a formal topic in a future meeting where we could include, like it seemed like there maybe is somebody from FOP who raised their hand earlier who may, but that's also gonna, I think we need some organized answers in some ways that maybe we could prepare ahead of time. And I think that would be fruitful. Because if we agree, because this is an important topic, I'd like to know, for example, like, you know, what the past has been spent and what the policies are, just a little more clear information up front that I think this conversation I'm appreciating has targeted and brought out, but as a recommendation, maybe could we add it to a future agenda and have some of that information ahead of time, so that would help me.
Yeah, I think that was my intention, but I lacked that follow through. So thank you, Bill. And we don't have any motions that we can vote on, but like the sentiment seems to be to bring this back at a future meeting. And we can talk informally about what that can look like. And I know that Chad would be open to seeing it. So I'm assuming you turn it on the meeting and seen all this, but yeah, thank you, Bill. Any other comments, discussion? Okay. Next item on the agenda is public participation. Do we want to take any kind of break? No, sorry. Okay. So public participation, I saw, I'm gonna open up the chat, but I did see that Lauren and Kathleen have stacked. So I'm gonna call on, I see that you stacked, Kathleen, but Lauren raised her hand first during the discussion, so I will honor that.
Thanks, Javier. The only reason why I wanted to speak up then was to try to clear up the conversation about equity at the Fall Fest. So the Fall Fest was actually put on by PSO. We just have to get approval from FOP to do those sorts of things because all the fundraising is going to them. Equity was a huge issue that I brought up because I wanted to make sure like this is an event for everybody. So to answer the question about equity and refreshments, it was a free event. People asked for a donation. So when you arrived there, if you wanted to give a donation, you could, but everyone got tickets that they could use to buy both food and beverages. The only like fundraiser sort of things were the donuts and the coffee, and then a few other like specialty things like getting a henna tattoo, and then the taffy apples, I believe. But all the games were free, which means like I actually bought and donated bags and bags of like gifts and toys for kids to win at those games. And then all the candy that they got was like, there was lots of fun to be had by anybody if they walked in without a dime. So it was like the bigger things that were of cost. Also a side note, going off of like the further conversation about FOP and like where the money is going. So I've been pretty regularly attending FOP meetings when I've been in town. And the October meeting, there was an FOP budget. And this is, I think this might've been the first or second FOP meeting that I attended. And the budget showed like very little left over. And I would say the vast majority of the money was going to school programming, that they were saying that like that's their whole purpose, is to fund the school programming. So although I'm not a member of FOP and I can't speak to it specifically, and unfortunately they don't have the budget on their website, but the 2021-22 budget was, I mean, it showed very little excess left over after they spent the money on the school programming. So I just wanted to mention that. And also that I had brought up as just a parent that I had heard from this student council and other parents about the bathrooms being a situation, as well as Principal Amy. And I had mentioned to them, like, that would be a great thing for you guys to fund, top to bottom stalls that are ungendered. And that way kids can freely use whatever bathroom they want. And Chad was really receptive and he said he would talk to Principal Amy. So it wasn't like one of those things where I felt like they were just going to say, oh, yes or no to me. They definitely said like, oh, that's an interesting proposal. We'll talk to Principal Amy on her needs. So just wanted to bring that up as an outside perspective who's not a member of LSC nor FOP, just a new parent.
Thank you, Lauren. And thank you for centering equity when we were organizing the Fall Fest. I wasn't able to attend, but I appreciate that. And I don't think that I'll speak for myself. I wasn't saying that the FOP doesn't do above the board things, like that I know that they fund a lot of the arts programs, but I also know that they, I don't think anyone was trying to say that FOP didn't contribute to the school. So we were just talking about how it relates to our oversight here on the LSC. Kathleen?
Hi, good evening. I'm Kathleen Hayes. I have a sixth grader at Peirce, and this is our first year at Peirce. And I have two comments on two issues. The first one is brief. I don't see Kim on the meeting anymore, but I think Mr. Lee is probably still here. So I want to thank the LSC members who spoke up about the IB stakeholder engagement process. And just, I want to second, third, fourth, the comments to please revise the form with an equity lens to include and not just have people opt in, because we need to hear from people who don't have a voice at the school typically, because this curriculum, this program is for everyone. So I wanted to just piggyback on those comments. The other topic that I wanted to comment on is the last conversation about fundraising and how it's approved. And I'm sitting here as somebody whose child has been at 3 CPS schools, which is a whole other story in and of itself that I'd be glad to talk about someday. But you know, since his pre-K days, my kid, this is his 4th CPS school, and I have been an ardent participant in LSC meetings and an observer of them. I also was on a Friends of board briefly at one of those schools. And at every single one of those schools, what the LSC members who've spoken up are pushing for was the process. And that is to say that the protocol was that the LSC, in collaboration with the principal, and you know, probably I think in conversations with the board members of the Friends of groups, together collaboratively set the fundraising priorities. But the Friends of group had no jurisdiction over that. They simply fundraised. And then monthly reports by the Friends of groups happened at every single one of those schools. So I'm just sitting here kind of like, I'm gobsmacked to hear that this has not been the process at Peirce. And it raises a whole host of issues if this isn't what we're working toward, which have been talked about, but to have a small set of parents who are part of a separate 501c3 have jurisdiction over what the fundraising priorities are. If I'm understanding correctly, that's how it's been working for a school. Just that raises tremendous equity issues.
Sorry, Kathleen.
One tiny set of parents to have that say.
Sorry, Kathleen, those were your 2 minutes.
Thank you.
But thank you. Okay, the next person on stack is Dory.
Yes, hi. Sorry, I apologize. I have to be off camera, but my comments are kind of obsolete because Kathleen sort of hit the nails. I was just going to do a shout out to the LSC today for the conversation that you engaged in related to the IB stakeholder, recognizing that the way things are done currently just present a lot of barriers to the parents that we want to make sure that feeling included. And so being really intentional and recognizing that it's not about opting in. We really need to be intentional in inviting people and making sure that they understand their voice matters and that we are looking for their voices is so important. A simple cold outreach is how I think I refer to it. Is just not enough. We need to do more. We need to be more intentional. We need to understand that the way the system works excludes people, and we need to do more to ensure that we are reaching out and creating an inviting space. So thank you, LSC, for recognizing that. I really appreciated the conversation today. I look forward to many more.
Thank you, Dory. Last call for stack. Greg has stacked.
Hi, thanks. I just wanted to pose a quick question. As Kathleen mentioned, I saw that Assistant Principal Leibovitz had to leave, but I wondered if Assistant Principal Lee might know the answer to this. Just thinking about the IB review process that was described, and with kind of accessibility in mind, I was wondering if it's kind of a two-part question. The first is, for parents who participate in that review, I was wondering if the primary information the parent is supposed to bring to the review is sort of just what they've heard from their student, or if alternatively there's sort of documentation about how the standards and practices are being implemented. So that was the first question, kind of like, what's the information that parent participants are intended to use in reviewing in participating in the review process. And then the second question, kind of related to access, was just whether there are plans for both interpretation to be offered as part of those review meetings that Assistant Principal Leibovitz Leibovitz mentioned, and also if there are supporting materials that parents are intended to review, if those are intended to be offered sort of in a linguistically accessible way. Thanks.
Not sure if Mr. Lee is going to be able to answer those. Can we follow up?
I don't have the answer.
No, I know, but
But interpretation, yes, would be available. I'm not sure in terms of the supporting document.
okay. So Greg, I don't, since the question was to people not on the LSC, I don't think that there's anyone who can respond to you. But I think we will forward that on as best we can.
And I'm also happy to follow up with Assistant Principal Leibovitz. I wanted to raise the question in case it was something that Assistant Principal Lee did have the information, but completely understand that that's not the case. So I'm happy to follow up directly with Assistant Principal Leibovitz with the question, if that's preferred.
It's up to you, Greg. Let's touch base off.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Any other one? Anyone? Oh, sorry, that's 10 minutes. So the next item on the agenda is committee reports. Is anyone from back on the call? Seeing none, after back is the PPLC. Sorry, can you
It's charged enough.
Miss Amy gave the update for PPLC, but we reviewed the staff survey from development as.
to repeat what Principal Amy gave the PPLC update? Was that okay? Bill, did you hear that? No, they didn't hear you. Can you? Sorry, we're trying to resolve this.
At the last PPLC meeting, we reviewed the developed capacity staff survey data. Ms. Amy mentioned that in her report.
Okay, thank you. Next is the Principal Evaluation Committee.
I can chime in on that. I emailed out to the council a proposed schedule for rolling out the community survey, and ultimately reviewing that and voting on approving the principal evaluation. I don't have capacity to, unfortunately, kind of move that process along. So I'm going to ask someone from the council to take on kind of spearheading, getting the process going for principal evaluation. I'm not sure when that's due, but something to circle back with Office of LSC Relations on.
I'll follow up with LSC members to see if there's somebody who can take that over, since I don't know that anyone has spoken up about that yet. Next item is safety and security.
Let me unmute. No updates to share today. We haven't met for this month, but we're meeting next month. Thank you, March 1st. I knew it was coming up.
Next item is bylaws committee.
No update.
Other than the typo that we need to correct at the next meeting. Cleanliness committee. Sorry.
So one of the things on our meetings for safety committee is we always talk about cleanliness concerns. We've had a couple of concerns about some rooms not being vacuumed. And one concern teachers were having was that, you know, stuff was running out in the bathroom, but actually I did get clarification and I talked with Ms. Caro, and I also let the band of teachers, we just have to buzz the office and they will refill the supplies in the bathroom and in the classroom, and that seems to be working. I know this week I was out of paper towels, wipes, and sanitizer in my room, and they came up right away. So we haven't had many cleanliness issues. There's been a few here and there, but nowhere to the extreme that they were like a few years ago.
LSC communications. I think no updates for communications. Any other committee reports? I think we've had them all. Next on the agenda is community group reports. Friends of Peirce, is there anyone from Friends of Peirce on the meeting? Seeing no hands. Peirce Service Organization. Is there anyone from the Peirce Service Organization here to give an update? Okay, seeing no one here. Last is rep, and I see that Sean is here for rep, so I will unmute Sean.
Hello, thank you. We don't have much of a report right now, but we are going to have a working meeting next Wednesday, February 23rd. And there should be a link going out in the newsletter this week, and it will be sort of an update on what we've been doing, but more of a working meeting talking about equity in practice. And so we'll be welcoming anyone who wants to come and talk with us about that. And so I guess just look for that link. So thank you.
Thank you, Sean.
Okay, thanks.
Any questions for rep? Seeing none, next item on the agenda is public participation. If you want to participate, please stack. I'll give it 30 more seconds. Okay. Next item on the agenda is norms. Does anybody want to speak to the norms? Nope. No, nobody's calling anything out. That's
I was curious if a norm or something is setting a time limit to our meetings. We've gotten better at making them, but I can't speak for everyone, but just being here till, 8 or so at night, it's draining. And I just wonder, like, sometimes I just wonder if there's a way, I don't know if that could be a norm, if that, like, can we set a time limit to things? I know we did that with public participation, right? So that's shortened. Is there a way that we can brainstorm to, or if I'm the only one who has this concern, then that's fine. But just wondering if that's something we could consider as a council.
Would you mind, so if that's something that you want to bring to the table, could you supply with some recommendations of how you want to do that, or? or
Yeah, I don't
some
know. Yeah.
suggestions? Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just
Yeah.
brainstorming. If anyone else feels that way about trying to.
An agenda item for next month. We'll have a discussion.
No, I think, sorry, can you,
Sorry.
Does anyone else have that concern or?
No, I mean, I think it's a legitimate concern. I think that we're at 2.5 hours and that I think an hour and a half to 2 hours would be the best. There are things that I can do as chair, like take a speakers list. And I can also ask people to speak for a certain amount of time. But the last time that I tried to do that, I was yelled at. So I don't know that, but I can. Yeah, and I'm. Yeah, I think so. So,
As long as we don't jeopardize public participation any more than it is, we have over the last, I don't know, at least the time that I've been here, I can speak for myself. The community is engaged and activated and motivated, and I'm not in favor of shutting them down in any way.
no, I don't think anyone's talking. I don't. Yeah, I don't. That does,
Email down, like, you know what I'm saying? We do a lot of, make the report sheet, you don't have to email the report, you know, and that way, like, it's made exciting, and that report being public, or, like, you know, ways of that, way, not
I just wanted to add, I felt like, I don't know, I feel like the last couple of meetings haven't necessarily, they haven't been as long. I think tonight, the conversation about FOP, I mean, it's a huge conversation, you know, and I think that's what kind of contributes to the time, but I feel you on that. But I also want to make sure that for me personally, being sensitive to talk, when we have conversations like that, that they can't be buttoned up in kind of 5 minutes, you know what I mean? But wherever we can, to definitely try and have it, you know, at 90 minutes, 2 hours, because you guys have had a long day, everybody in this room has had a long day. You know, and how can, you know, just and everyone, you know, and everyone that's joining us, like, how can we kind of streamline it, you know, and encourage that participation where people, you know, want to hang out and do public participation and all the things, so.
Next item on the agenda, other business. And after that, announcements, any announcements? The deadline to submit applications is March 4th. If you are sick of any of these jokers, feel free to replace them.
We have them posted and we put them into the LSC folder. Just because, correct, just because there's not, you know, people aren't entering the building. And I just, along with that, this year we will be able to elect, our students will be able to elect one student in 7th and 8th grade to be a part of the council. So Ms. Walsh, who supports student council, along with Ms. Caro, are using some of the district resources. They'll be meeting with all students in 6th and 7th grade, because it would be for next year's 7th and 8th graders. There's a 1.5-minute video that they can share, along with a letter that they will give students to inform them about that. And then we'll have an opportunity for a student forum along with a student election.
So speaking about student election, so we have 2 locations, right? So we have main campus and the branch. And folks are asking about whether there's going to be a way for people at the branch to vote at the branch.
Yeah, I emailed Office of Local School Council Relations that question, and I haven't heard back.
Just related to the LSC elections, we've also received communications from the Office of LSC Relations that there will be a candidate forum the week of March 21st. So that's just so that's on everybody's radars, also anyone at the meeting.
That's in addition to the regular meeting.
Correct. So March 17th, and then the following week, we're going to have the candidate forum. It's up to us to decide on the day, and I don't know if it's up to us or Principal Zamey, but I don't know how it's worked in the past, but we'll touch base on that. Any other announcements? Is there a motion to adjourn? Trey, seconded by Jerry. All those in favor, so moved. All right. Thank you, everybody.